The longest night has ended. What was designed to break you has only proven you, and heaven's verdict is clear. It's over. The chapter of grinding trial, of endless pressure, of unseen tears has closed. You are stepping into the sunrise of fulfillment, and nothing can pull you back into the shadows that tried to silence your faith. Every trial had its purpose. You may have thought you were being punished, but in truth, you were being prepared. God was not absent in your struggle. He was present in every detail, shaping your character, stretching your faith, and ensuring that when blessing arrived, it would not destroy you. Isaiah 41 verse 10 reminds us not to fear, because God strengthens, helps, and upholds us with his righteous right hand. That strength you now carry was formed in the furnace of endurance. Endurance was never meant to make you weary, it was meant to make you ready. The crown of life is not given to the one who starts the race, but to the one who holds steady until the end. James chapter 1 verse 12 declares that blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown promised by the Lord. You didn't just survive the test. You graduated from it with heaven's honor upon your name. Think of the seasons when everything felt delayed, when prayers seemed unanswered. What you called delay, God called protection. If blessing had arrived too soon, it might have slipped through your hands or been stolen by those not meant to share it. God shielded your promise until you were strong enough to carry it. Waiting was never wasted time, it was training ground. Hidden battles forged visible strength. The nights when you wrestled in silence, when no one saw the warfare in your mind, were the very moments heaven applauded your resilience. You became a testimony, not just by what you achieved, but by what you endured. Psalm 126 verse 5 tells us that those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. Every tear that fell in private became a seed for public harvest. You stand at the threshold of abundance. The shift has already taken place in the unseen, and what is written in heaven is about to manifest in your life. Wealth is not just about material increase. It is the fullness of God's promise: health, peace, provision, restoration, influence, and yes, financial overflow. You were trained to handle blessing without losing focus. The wilderness taught you humility, and the valley taught you dependence. Now you are ready to carry legacy, not just prosperity. This season carries the fragrance of completion. Cycles of lack, fear, and disappointment have ended. Heaven moves in seasons, and the old one has expired. You no longer have to live under the weight of what was. You are stepping into what is and what will be. What felt like loss was never a grave. It was the groundwork for legacy. You see, the wilderness wasn't punishment. It was preparation, wearing a disguise. What felt like the harshest chapter of your life was in fact heaven's classroom, where God himself was the teacher and your endurance was the lesson plan. If you look closely, you'll realize the wilderness was never about stripping you down for nothing, but about shaping you for everything that is coming. Scarcity has a strange way of teaching what prosperity never can. When you had little, you learned to stretch, to prioritize, to manage, to steward what was in your hand. Deuteronomy 8 verse 2 reminds us that God leads his people through the wilderness to humble them and to test what is in their hearts. That lean season was not a curse, it was a curriculum. The way you managed scraps trained your spirit to carry abundance without arrogance. What others wasted you treasured, and that has positioned you to handle increase with wisdom. But there was more happening than just the lesson of resources. Hardship became the sharpening stone of your discernment. You began to see who was truly for you, and who was only present for what you could provide. You discovered the difference between an open door and a trap dressed like opportunity. Romans 5 verse 3-4 tells us that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance builds character, and character births hope. The very challenges you hated at the time were sharpening your ability to recognize God's hand versus the counterfeit offers of the enemy. Pressure was another teacher. God allowed the weight of certain seasons not to crush you, but to reveal what he planted in private. Just like a seed must be pressed by soil before it can sprout, your gifting had to be buried under hardship before it could break open. Some people thought you were done, but pressure was the very thing that made what God placed in you undeniable. You weren't being buried to die, you were being planted to rise. Delays, too, carried their own assignment. Every time the answer seemed slow, every time the promise lingered, impatience was being killed off. You were learning not to leap at the first flash of excitement, but to wait until wisdom had its say. A delayed blessing often saves you from a premature disaster. What once felt like God ignoring you was Him safeguarding your destiny. And while all of this was happening, language was being built inside of you. The lessons of lack became the vocabulary of leadership. Leaders are not made in thrones. They are formed in trenches. You can speak to struggle with authority because you lived it. You can guide others out of famine because you survived it. Your credibility is no longer based on theory, but on testimony. Yet there is still a deeper layer pruning. Every branch that bears fruit, Jesus said in John 15, is pruned so it may bear even more. Before multiplication comes subtraction. God cut away people, habits, and places that couldn't go with you into the future. What felt like loss was divine editing. You weren't being reduced, you were being refined. Even setbacks carried holy strategy. What looked like failure was often God clearing space for a better foundation. Some doors had to close so you would not settle for less than the fullness of what God intended. Those disappointments were not detours. They were redirections steering you away from collapse and towards sustainable success. Through it all, a spiritual strength was forged that money can never buy. You may not have noticed it in the moment, but your prayer life deepened. Your worship became raw. Your dependence on God grew unshakable. 1 Peter 1 verse 7 declares that the tested genuineness of your faith is more precious than gold refined by fire. You carry a resilience now that no paycheck, no applause, and no recognition could have given you. While the world chases wealth, heaven releases it to the prepared. That's the difference between striving and receiving. The system of men runs on competition, manipulation, and endless hunger for more. The system of God runs on alignment, obedience, and trust. You don't have to beg or scramble for what is already written into your destiny. Heaven has resources earmarked for you, and when the timing aligns, nothing on earth can stop their release. It's important to recognize that God funds assignments, not egos. Money and provision do not come just to decorate a life. They come to empower a mission. When you said yes to His call, you entered into heaven's payroll. Every calling comes with its own supply. Philippians 4 verse 19 declares that God will supply all your needs according to His riches in glory through Christ Jesus. Notice it doesn't say according to the markets or according to your employer. It says according to His riches in glory. That means the size of your provision is tied to His capacity, not your paycheck. Wealth in the kingdom is not one-dimensional. The world measures it in bank accounts and assets, but heaven defines it by peace, wisdom, health, relationships, and influence. You could have millions and still be impoverished if you have no peace. You could have luxury and still be bankrupt if your relationships are broken. Proverbs 10 verse 22 declares that the blessing of the Lord makes one rich and adds no sorrow with it. That is the difference between heaven's economy and the world's. His provision enriches you without enslaving you. The turning point comes when character outruns ambition. When who you are becomes more important than what you achieve, provision begins to overtake you. God does not trust resources into reckless hands. He waits until integrity is proven. Many wonder why the breakthrough has not yet arrived, But the truth is, God waits for a vessel who will not use blessing as a weapon of pride. The moment your character shows you can be trusted, you'll see doors open that no striving could ever force. And here's the good news. Heaven's economy doesn't collapse with earthly markets. When stocks fall, when inflation rises, when nations shake, the kingdom remains steady. God's resources are not subject to Wall Street or government budgets. You belong to an unshakable supply chain that is fueled by eternal abundance. While others panic, you can rest because your source is not in decline. Integrity is the currency of transfer. God shifts resources into the hands of those he can trust. Throughout history, you can see how he moved wealth from Pharaoh's Egypt to Israel, from wicked kings into the hands of the righteous. When integrity has been proven, heaven has no hesitation about releasing what belongs to you. It is never about accumulation. It is always about assignment. True wealth always fuels kingdom expansion. If the blessing only stops at you, it is incomplete. The wealth God sends is designed to advance his purposes, feeding the hungry, clothing the poor, funding the gospel, restoring families, building generational legacies. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 8 declares that God is able to make all grace abound toward you, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Notice the progression the blessing flows in, so the good works can flow out. And yes, financial provision is included, but it comes with divine timing, not human striving. When God opens the window, resources arrive suddenly, sometimes even from unexpected places. One day of favor can outweigh years of toil. He knows the exact moment when you are ready and when the need is urgent. Your job is not to chase the blessing, but to stay in alignment until the blessing chases you. This wealth isn't random. It is heaven's endorsement on your life. Every open door, every divine connection, every unexpected provision is a signature of God saying, I approve, I trust, I release. The shift you are entering is not about survival anymore. It is about stewardship. You will see the goodness of God not just in your spirit, but in your resources, your opportunities, and your influence. And when it comes, it will be undeniable. Heaven's economy has been unlocked in your favor. For so long it seemed heaven was quiet, yet what once felt like an echo of unanswered cries is now shifting into a flood of divine response. The prayers you thought had vanished into the air were never ignored. They were being stored, pressed, and prepared for release. Suddenly the silence is breaking, and the answers are arriving like rushing waters, unstoppable and undeniable. What many call silence is often construction. God was not absent. He was building, laying foundations too deep for human eyes to see. You stood in nights where it felt like nothing was moving, but beneath the surface the Lord was assembling details that would only make sense when revealed together. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 reminds us that the vision awaits its appointed time. Though it lingers, wait for it, it will certainly come and will not delay. Heaven's calendar is never late. It is perfectly synchronized with destiny. In those hidden years you may have assumed inactivity, but God was busy behind the veil. He works in shadows to prepare you for light. Psalm 40 verse 1-3 declares, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. Notice the waiting was not wasted. The lifting, the setting, the song that follows all came because of a season where patience was tested. The delay was never denial. In fact, delayed answers often arrive with multiplied blessings. What comes now is not just the answer to one request, but an overflow that covers many needs at once. The years of seeming silence are about to erupt into fullness, and when it happens, it will feel as if heaven is repaying time itself. Isaiah 30 verse 18 says, The Lord longs to be gracious to you. Therefore he will rise up to show you compassion. His waiting was not indifference, it was preparation for extravagant mercy. Think of the moments where you felt overlooked, where your cries seemed unheard. Those very hours are now becoming the foundation of testimony. What you thought was being ignored has been written into the storyline of glory. Every tear has been accounted for, every whispered prayer catalogued in heaven's library. Now their release will not only heal your heart, but also inspire others who once doubted if God ever listens. There is also a holy purpose behind the quiet. In silence, God kills spiritual pride before promotion. If answers came instantly, we might believe they were earned by eloquence or effort. But when prayers are stretched over time, humility is born and dependency deepens. By the time the answer arrives, it is clear to you and to the world this is the Lord's doing, not human achievement. That kind of humility cannot be faked. It is forged in silence. And here's the beauty: answers now will silence every skeptic who doubted you. Those who assumed your faith was empty will have no words when they witness the fruit. What God is releasing will be so undeniable, so visible, that the very mouths which once mocked will be forced into awe. The testimony will not be private. It will thunder publicly, leaving no space for debate. Heaven's timing redeems every moment that felt stolen. Nothing is wasted in the kingdom. The years of obscurity will make the unveiling more powerful. The delays, the denials, the detours, all of it will be redeemed in one sweep of divine timing. When God moves, He restores in ways that cause you to forget the pain of waiting, because the blessing outweighs the burden. Fulfillment after silence carries a special weight. It doesn't just satisfy a prayer, it carries wonder. It anchors faith in ways that quick answers never could. When the silence breaks, you don't just receive an answer, you receive awe, reverence, and fresh conviction that God rules over time, circumstance, and destiny. What was whispered in prayer will now thunder as public testimony. Every hidden cry is becoming a sound of victory, every secret groan turning into a song of triumph. The silent years are over, and the stage is set for heaven's response to manifest openly, undeniably, gloriously. In the same breath that God answers with testimony, He also answers with transfer. Your surrender is about to be met with supply. Hands once lifted in emptiness will not remain barren, for the drought has broken. What once slipped through your grasp, what once seemed impossible to hold on to, is now being returned in a way only heaven could orchestrate. The hands you lifted in surrender are the same hands God is about to fill until they overflow. God never leaves surrendered hands empty. Every moment you stretch them upward in prayer, He was counting, measuring, and preparing a return. The world may not have noticed the times you lifted weary hands in worship while your heart carried heavy burdens, but heaven noticed. Joel 2 verse 25 to 26 declares that the Lord will restore the years the locust has eaten, and that His people will be satisfied with plenty. Your labor, your tears, your persistence in faith, none of it was wasted. You are stepping into the season where God's restoration will meet your devotion. The drought was never meant to define you, it was meant to prepare you. Now what was lost will return in unexpected ways. It will not look exactly like what was taken. It will return, multiplied, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. This is not compensation, it is transformation. The emptiness you endured has created capacity. Where your hands once trembled in lack, they are now strengthened to carry increase without fear of losing it again. Do not limit this filling to finances alone. Heaven's wealth is deeper. Your hands are being filled with ideas that will unlock doors no man can shut, with connections that align you to divine purpose, and with resources that extend beyond what money can buy. Psalm 65 verse 11 says that God crowns the year with His goodness, and that His paths drip with abundance. This means the provision in your life will not be random. It will carry the unmistakable signature of His goodness stamped with purpose and direction. You may have wondered if the tears you shed in silence were worth it, but those tears were watering seeds you could not see. Every sacrifice, every hidden yes to God, every moment you chose obedience over compromise has built a harvest that is now pressing into your life. The harvest answers every tear. What you planted in pain, you will now reap in joy. When God fills your hands, no man can empty them. The same hands that once held only fragments will now carry wholeness. The same hands that once stretched for help will now extend help to others. Malachi 3 verse 10 declares that God will open the windows of heaven and pour out blessing until there is not room enough to contain it. This is not poetic imagery, it is divine reality. When the Lord fills, He fills beyond human measurement, beyond human expectation, and beyond the reach of the enemy's theft. Provision is never random. It aligns with obedience. The measure of your surrender has prepared the measure of your filling. When you trusted God with the little, you positioned yourself for the much. When you gave what looked insignificant, you opened space for significance. The obedience you practiced when no one was watching has qualified you to carry what many pray for, but few are ready to hold. Now your hands, once weary, will carry blessing with ease. The weight of provision will not crush you, because God has already strengthened your grip through struggle. You are not just being blessed, you are being equipped. The same wilderness that taught you resilience is now ensuring you handle abundance without fear, without arrogance, and without waste. Lift those hands again. They will not rise empty as they once did. They will rise as vessels ready to be filled. The season of release has begun, and what God places in your hands will not slip away. It will remain, it will multiply, and it will testify to the world that He alone is the giver of every good and perfect gift. With every deposit comes a responsibility to steward well what heaven entrusts. This isn't just money coming, it's mission funding. The increase arriving in your life is not a random overflow of resources for comfort alone. It is heaven's deliberate investment into your future, into your calling, into the very work that God has trusted you to carry. The Father never releases blessing to create idols. He releases it to expand impact. Think about it. Abundance follows assignment. When you are faithful to walk in the direction of your calling, provision follows the path. That's why Paul wrote in 1 Timothy 6 verse 17 to 19 that those who are rich in this present world should not put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but instead put their hope in God and be rich in good deeds. Wealth was never meant to be an end in itself. It was designed to be a servant to your divine purpose. The temptation, of course, is to make prosperity the proof of your worth. Yet prosperity without purpose produces nothing but emptiness. You've seen it before, people who seem to have everything but carry no joy, no peace, no rest. But when your increase is connected to God's plan, when your finances, influence, and resources are tied to eternal fruit, fulfillment begins to saturate every part of your being. You're not just blessed, you're positioned to change lives. You must also remember that kingdom wealth carries humility, not arrogance. You are not stepping into a season of pride, but into a season of service. The more your hands hold, the more your heart must bow. Jesus made it clear in Luke 12 verse 48 that to whom much is given, much will be required. That requirement is not a burden, but an honor. Heaven is trusting you with resources that ripple far beyond your lifetime. The world says gain to flaunt, but God says gain to give. He funds generosity before luxury, and He elevates stewards who know the difference. This doesn't mean you cannot enjoy the fruit of your labor. He delights in blessing you, but the focus is never self-indulgence. Your influence multiplies when your giving outweighs your getting. Every seed you sow becomes an echo in eternity. True blessing always builds others while sustaining you. This is where the philosophy of the kingdom outshines the philosophy of the world. In the world, success is measured by what you keep. In the kingdom, success is measured by what you release. Proverbs 19 verse 17 declares that whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Can you imagine the creator of the universe calling himself your debtor because of your generosity? That is how seriously he honors stewardship. As this wealth flows into your life, it is crucial that it echoes heaven's values on earth. That means your business decisions, your investments, your daily spending, all must reflect God's heart. If your bank account grows, but your character shrinks, you've lost what truly matters. But when your soul prospers along with your resources, every dollar becomes a testimony of grace. And here is the principle you cannot ignore. Stewardship proves gratitude before God releases more. When you handle well what He places in your hands, you demonstrate that you are ready for greater responsibility. You are not just holding money, you are holding kingdom assignments, opportunities to lift burdens, chances to rewrite stories of despair into testimonies of hope. The flood of provision heading your way isn't only about survival or comfort, it is about mission. You are entering a season where your blessing will speak louder through your giving than your words ever could. And the most powerful sermons you will preach may never be spoken from a pulpit, but through the quiet, consistent generosity of your life. Friend, the ones who pitied you will watch God elevate you. Those who once whispered behind your back, shaking their heads at your struggle, will soon see a different picture, a table spread in the presence of your enemies. Psalm 23 verse 5 declares, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." That table is not just about food on a plate. It is about honor being restored, dignity being displayed, and vindication being revealed by the hand of God. For too long you carried the sting of misunderstanding. People judged your delay as denial. They mistook your humility for weakness and your hidden battles as proof that you were forgotten. But God has been watching. He has been measuring your tears, counting your steps, and storing your faithfulness as evidence for the day of unveiling. When He lifts the humble, it is not gradual, it is undeniable. The very ones who pitied you will have no choice but to admit God's hand was on your life the entire time. Do not underestimate how God writes stories. He has a way of taking the very place of your ridicule and turning it into the stage of your reward. Think of Hannah, mocked for her barrenness, who later held Samuel in her arms. Think of Joseph, betrayed and thrown into a pit, who later ruled from the palace. In every case, the mockery of men became the backdrop for the majesty of God. What was meant to shame you is about to showcase you. You will not need to defend yourself. Vindication is God's work, not yours. Every lie that was spread, every false assumption that was believed, every shadow cast over your name, God Himself is answering it not with arguments but with evidence. Zephaniah 3 verse 19 says, "At that time I will deal with all who oppressed you. I will rescue the lame. I will gather the exiles. I will give them praise and honor in every land where they have suffered shame." Notice the sequence: oppression dealt with, wounds healed, shame reversed into honor. That is the turning of the tables. Some of the very people who dismissed you will become witnesses of what only God could do. He does not turn things for revenge, but for revelation. The elevation of your life will reveal His faithfulness, His justice, and His glory. This is why Isaiah 62 verse 2 declares, "The nations will see your righteousness, and all kings your glory. You will be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will bestow." The shift happening to you is not about proving a point, it is about revealing a name. God is placing His mark upon your life so that no one can mistake who promoted you. What they laughed at will soon be celebrated. The same story that was once used as gossip will be retold as a testimony. Do you see the beauty of God's justice? He does not erase your past. He redeems it. Every tear becomes a jewel